When your children don't respect you anymore, do this now, Senior Health. You raised them with love. You gave up your sleep, your dreams, and sometimes even yourself. But now they barely call. They interrupt you, ignore your words, or treat you like you don't matter. And the worst part, you start to wonder if you did something wrong. But here's the truth. It's not too late. There are 6 powerful things you can do, starting today, to reclaim their respect without fighting, begging, or losing your dignity. If your children have stopped seeing your worth, it's time to show them who you truly are. If this message spoke to your heart, don't leave without joining our community. Click subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a video that supports, inspires, and reminds you of your worth. Because your voice matters and you deserve to be heard. Number 1, I find the more humble I am, the more my child looks down on me. There comes a point in life when parents realize something deeply painful. No matter how much they try to please their grown children, it never seems to be enough. You bend, adjust, sacrifice, and give until you feel like there's nothing left of you. But instead of receiving appreciation, you're met with indifference or even disrespect. It hurts because this isn't just about your children ignoring a favor. It's about the years, decades you've poured into raising them, guiding them, loving them through every season of their lives. And now it feels like the more you try to do right by them, the more invisible you become. Many elderly parents fall into the trap of chasing their children's approval. You say yes when you want to say no. You change your plans at the last minute just because they ask. You let rude comments slide. You keep quiet, thinking it's better not to upset the peace. And all the while, you're teaching them, without even realizing it, that your voice doesn't matter, that your needs come second. Over time, that message sinks in. They stop asking what you want. They stop considering how you feel. They stop respecting you. And the more you try to win them back by being agreeable, the more they pull away. This cycle doesn't come from malice. It comes from patterns. And unless you break the pattern, the relationship only becomes more imbalanced. Respect doesn't come from sacrifice alone. It comes from self-respect. When you respect your own time, energy, and emotions, others take notice. That means saying no when you're tired. That means speaking up when something hurts you. That means valuing your own space, your hobbies, your life, without waiting for your children to validate it. You're not a bad parent for setting boundaries. You're not selfish for wanting to be treated with basic decency. In fact, you're teaching your children a powerful lesson: how to treat others with respect by watching how you treat yourself. There's strength in calm confidence. There's dignity in saying, "This matters to me," even if they don't agree. Your love doesn't have to look like silent suffering. It can look like standing tall, even if your knees shake a little. So if you found yourself constantly bending just to keep the family together, stop and ask, what kind of example am I setting? Your children may not change overnight, but the moment you stop chasing their approval is the moment you start reclaiming your own power. And that's when they start to see you differently, not as someone desperate for love, but as someone worthy of respect. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly the shift your relationship needs. If this message spoke to your heart, don't leave without joining our community. Click subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a video that supports, inspires, and reminds you of your worth. Because your voice matters and you deserve to be heard. Number 2, I called, but he didn't pick up. But when he needed money, he came to me. One of the biggest mistakes we make when our children begin treating us with disrespect is thinking that arguing will fix it. We raise our voices, repeat our sacrifices, list everything we've done for them, as if sheer logic or emotional guilt will make them suddenly understand. But the painful truth is this: respect can't be demanded through words. It's earned through presence, through how you carry yourself even in moments of disappointment. The more you argue, the more you look like you're trying to prove your worth, and the more power you give away. Think about it. When was the last time anyone truly respected someone who was yelling or begging to be heard? Most people, including your children, tune out when they feel blamed, cornered, or controlled. They don't see the pain behind your words, they just see the conflict. Instead of listening, they defend themselves. Instead of connecting, they pull away. And in that moment, the gap between you and them grows wider. But what if, instead of trying to convince them, you simply started showing them? What if, instead of fighting for respect, you quietly embodied it? Real strength doesn't scream. It stands. It listens. It responds, but doesn't react. I've seen parents who regain the admiration of their children, not by pushing harder, but by letting go of the need to win. They stopped jumping into every argument. They stopped trying to prove they were right. And slowly their energy changed. They began speaking with calm certainty. They made decisions based on self-respect. And their children noticed, even if they didn't admit it at first. There's a quiet power in choosing peace over pride. It doesn't mean you allow disrespect. It means you hold your line with grace. For example, when your child interrupts, instead of yelling, you calmly say, "I'll continue when you're ready to listen." That's not weakness, that's leadership. It's showing your children what respect looks like by practicing it yourself. When you carry yourself with dignity, when you show that your emotions aren't easily manipulated, they begin to see you differently. Not as someone desperate for their approval, but as someone who owns their truth. You don't need to dominate the room, you just need to own your space within it. If your child is disrespectful, ask yourself, am I meeting fire with fire or showing them another way? Because often, the most powerful change comes not when you push, but when you model the kind of behavior you want to receive. Over time, your steady presence can speak louder than any argument. So lead with grace, stand in quiet strength. Let your actions remind them of who you are, not just a parent, but a person worthy of deep respect. And if they've forgotten, your example may just be the thing that helps them remember. Number 3, I gave up everything just to be with my child. And now I see I was wrong. One of the hardest but most necessary shifts we must make as parents, especially as we grow older, is letting go of emotional dependence on our children. It sounds harsh at first, but think about it. When your sense of happiness, self-worth, or peace depends on whether your children call, visit, or show affection, you've placed your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. And even if they love you, that weight can feel like pressure. Over time, instead of drawing them closer, it often pushes them away. Many elderly parents wait by the phone, hoping to hear their child's voice. When days go by in silence, they call first. And when their children don't respond with warmth or enthusiasm, it cuts deep. But the more you chase connection out of emotional need, the more it starts to feel like an obligation to them, not love. You may think you're showing care, but what they feel is expectation, and eventually that expectation becomes heavy. Take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? When was the last time you went out with friends, picked up a new interest, or spent time with people who uplift you, without waiting to see if your children had time for you? Reclaiming your emotional independence isn't about shutting them out. It's about showing them, and yourself, that your joy doesn't rely solely on their attention. When your children see that you are emotionally full, not empty and waiting, their perspective changes. They no longer see you as someone needy or fragile. They start to see you as whole, someone with their own rhythm, their own life. That self-sufficiency invites respect. It awakens curiosity. They start asking, "What has mom been up to lately?" Or, "How is dad doing?" Not because you asked, but because they want to know. There's a woman I once knew, kind, loving, always giving, who found herself heartbroken when her children grew distant. She would call daily, leave voicemails, text long messages. At first it came from love, but soon it was obvious. She needed them to fill a space inside her. One day she stopped, not out of anger, but out of self-love. She joined a yoga class. She began painting again. She filled her days with things that made her smile, and something beautiful happened. Her children started calling more. Not because they felt guilty, but because they were drawn to her again. The truth is, we are most respected when we are most whole. So if you feel ignored, overlooked, or emotionally empty, look inward, not outward. Begin tending to your own garden again. Because when your children see that your joy doesn't rely on them, they'll respect you more, not out of duty, but from admiration. If this message spoke to your heart, don't leave without joining our community. Click subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a video that supports, inspires, and reminds you of your worth, because your voice matters and you deserve to be heard. Number 4, you say I live out of date? Think old-fashioned. If you've ever wondered why your children continue to speak to you with disrespect, ignore your input, or treat your time like it doesn't matter, there's a hard truth that needs to be faced. People treat you the way you allow them to. This is not about blame, it's about awareness. As parents, especially as we get older, it's easy to tolerate more than we should. We excuse bad behavior with thoughts like, they're just stressed, or it's not worth the fight. But every time you stay silent in the face of disrespect, you're teaching them that it's acceptable. And over time, that becomes the standard. Setting boundaries isn't about being harsh. It's not about punishing or cutting people off. It's about deciding what kind of treatment you are no longer willing to accept, and calmly, clearly, and consistently reinforcing that. This could mean stopping a conversation when your child speaks to you in a hurtful tone. It could mean no longer rearranging your entire schedule to fit theirs. It might even mean telling them, if you can't speak to me respectfully, this conversation is over. Boundaries are uncomfortable at first, especially when you've spent years putting others before yourself. You may feel guilty, worried they'll be upset, or fear that you'll be seen as difficult. But here's the truth. The people who truly care about you will adapt. And the ones who get angry at your boundaries are often the ones who benefited most from you not having any. Take the story of Robert, a retired businessman who spent his life leading with strength, except at home. His adult children interrupted him, dismissed his opinions, and mocked his decisions. For years, he said nothing, thinking it wasn't worth causing conflict. But deep down, it eroded his confidence and self-worth. One day, something shifted. When his son cut him off mid-sentence, he said calmly but firmly, "I'll continue speaking when I'm being listened to." When his daughter rolled her eyes, he replied, "You don't have to agree, but I expect to be treated with respect." At first, they resisted, but over time, his steadiness made an impact. They began listening. They began thinking before speaking. Why? Because Robert respected himself, and they followed his lead. You don't have to wait for your children to change. You don't have to beg for better treatment. You can decide starting today to raise the standard. You're not being unreasonable. You're being real. And setting boundaries doesn't push people away. It creates a structure where love, communication, and respect can actually grow. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been tolerating too much? Where do you need to draw a line, not to divide your family, but to protect your dignity? Because when you set boundaries and enforce them with quiet strength, you teach your children one of the most valuable lessons of all, that love and respect must go hand in hand. Number 5, I feel like a burden. As parents, we're natural givers. We give time, money, advice, care, and sacrifice, often without being asked. And in the early years, that giving comes from love and duty. But as our children grow older, something unexpected can happen. Our generosity begins to feel one-sided. They stop saying thank you. They start expecting. And when we finally say no, we're met not with understanding, but with annoyance. It's painful, because you didn't give to be owed, but now you feel used. Here's what's important to realize. When you continue to give without appreciation, you don't create love. You create entitlement. Many parents fall into this trap unknowingly. You might send money even when your child never checks in. You might watch the grandchildren for hours despite having health issues. You might cook, clean, or help with errands, all without so much as a phone call in return. At first you tell yourself, it's just what parents do. But deep inside, resentment starts to build. And eventually the question comes up, if I stopped doing all of this, would they even miss me? Or just miss what I give them? I once knew a man named George, a father in his 70s. His children relied on him constantly. Need a loan? He gave. Need help moving? He showed up. Need a babysitter last minute? He dropped everything. But when George needed help after a minor surgery, no one was available. His calls were ignored, and when he asked for help, the reply was, "I'm busy." That moment changed him. George realized his kindness had become expected. His giving wasn't respected, it was assumed. So he made a powerful decision. He stopped overextending himself. He didn't stop loving, he just stopped giving without gratitude. At first, his children were frustrated. Why wasn't Dad available like before? Why did he hesitate to offer help? But slowly they began to understand. They started saying thank you again. They called more often, just to talk. They stopped assuming and started asking. Why? Because George taught them, gently but firmly, that his support was a gift, not a guarantee. You can do the same. You don't need to slam doors or withdraw completely. You just need to pause before giving. Ask yourself, is this appreciated or is this expected? If it's the latter, consider stepping back, not to punish, but to protect your energy, your time, and your heart. When your children see that your love is not limitless, not something they can take without thought, they'll start valuing it more. Generosity is beautiful, but only when it's mutual, when it flows in both directions. If you've been giving from a place of guilt or habit, it's time to shift. Because the more you give without appreciation, the less value it holds. And when you give from a place of self-respect, that's when love and respect can truly grow. Number 6, I want to be respected by my children. Not because I am a parent, but because I am me. Perhaps the most liberating realization a parent can have is this: your life does not and should not revolve entirely around your children. Yes, they were your world when they were little. You gave your all to raise them, protect them, and guide them. But once they've grown, your role changes. And if you continue making them the center of your emotional universe, it can actually damage the relationship instead of strengthening it. Why? Because when your children sense that you have nothing else, no joy, no interests, no purpose outside of them, they begin to feel pressured, and pressure pushes people away. Many parents struggle with this transition, especially after retirement, widowhood, or an empty nest. It's tempting to fill the silence with your children's lives. You check in constantly, offer advice they didn't ask for, wait by the phone for a message or an invitation. But over time, this well-intentioned attention starts to feel heavy to them. They begin to see you not as someone vibrant and whole, but as someone waiting, needing, watching. There's a woman I once knew, Eleanor, who fell into this exact pattern. After her husband passed, her children became her entire focus. She called every day. She made meals they didn't ask for. She gave endless advice, tried to manage their lives from afar. She thought she was showing love, but her kids began withdrawing. Shorter visits, delayed responses. And one day, Eleanor sat alone, realizing that she was pushing them away, not because she didn't love them, but because she had nothing else left for herself. Then she made a quiet, powerful shift. She joined a book club. She began volunteering at the local shelter. She took art classes, went to lunch with old friends, and even traveled with a group of seniors. Slowly, something beautiful happened. Her children started calling more, not because they felt guilty, but because they were curious. "How was Italy, Mom? What's your group reading this week?" Eleanor became interesting again, whole again, and through her independence, she regained their admiration. Here's the truth. People respect those who have their own lives. Your children will respect you more when they see that you're not sitting by the window waiting for them to call, but out in the world, living fully. It's not about abandoning them, it's about rediscovering you, the part of you that existed before you were someone's parent. The dreams, hobbies, friendships, laughter, and confidence that still live within you. So ask yourself, if my children didn't exist, who would I be? And then start building that version of you, not just for their respect, but for your happiness. Because the more vibrant your own life becomes, the more your children will be drawn back, not out of duty, but out of love and admiration. And that's the most powerful kind of respect there is.